Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. The book contains stories produced as scripted, AI-generated stories that promote entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The Silver Moon Pack's mating ceremony was the grandest event of the decade, and Sarah Thorne had no business being there. She stood at the very edge of the moonlit clearing, half hidden behind an ancient oak, her borrowed dress itching against her skin. The fabric was too tight across her shoulders, too loose at the waist, and the hem had been hastily stitched after her stepsister Callista had accidentally torn it while helping her dress. "You should be grateful I'm even letting you attend," Callista had said, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Sarah's arm as she dragged her to the mirror. "Father's new position means we must maintain appearances, even if one of us is, well, what you are." What Sarah was, apparently, was an embarrassment. The daughter of a deceased packless mother who'd had the audacity to capture Alpha Thorne's attention long enough to produce a child before dying of a mysterious illness. Sarah had been 8 when her father remarried, bringing Callista and her mother into their small cottage on the pack's outskirts. That had been 12 years ago. 12 years of being reminded that she didn't belong, that her mother's bloodline was tainted, that true pack wolves could sense the wrongness in her. "There she is," a voice whispered nearby, and Sarah's stomach clenched. 3 young she-wolves stood in a cluster, their ceremonial gowns glittering with crystals that caught the moonlight. Callista held court at the center, her silver dress matching her silver blonde hair perfectly. "Hiding in the shadows like always," Callista said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "How fitting." Sarah kept her eyes down, focusing on the elaborate ceremony taking place in the clearing's center. The Silver Moon Pack had been honored with a visit from the Alpha King himself. Kale Nightborn, ruler of all the wolf packs in the Northern Territories. He'd come to witness the mating ceremony between Silver Moon's alpha son and his chosen mate, a political alliance that would strengthen both packs. She'd only glimpsed the Alpha King once, when he'd arrived at sunset. Even from a distance he'd been imposing. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes that seemed to glow amber in the fading light. Power had radiated from him like heat from a forge, making every wolf in the vicinity instinctively lower their heads in submission. Now he stood beside the mating stone, his face bearing the unmistakable authority of his position as he observed the ceremony. He wore traditional ceremonial robes in deep black, embroidered with silver thread that formed the pattern of a wolf mid-leap. Around his shoulders hung a cloak of thick fur, fastened at the throat with a clasp bearing his royal seal. The ceremony proceeded with ancient words and binding oaths. Sarah found herself transfixed despite her desire to remain invisible. There was something beautiful about it. The way the 2 wolves pledged themselves to each other under the full moon. The way the pack howled its approval when they sealed their bond with a ceremonial bite. "Sarah." She turned to find Callista approaching, 3 other she-wolves flanking her like guards. Sarah's instinct screamed danger, but there was nowhere to run without causing a scene. "You've been hiding back here all evening," Callista said sweetly, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Come, sister. Let's get you closer to the celebration. After all, father would want his daughters to be seen together." Before Sarah could protest, Callista's fingers closed around her wrist, nails digging in hard enough to bruise. The other she-wolves crowded close, forming a wall that prevented escape, as they guided Sarah toward the clearing's center. "Callista, please!" Sarah tried to pull back, but her stepsister's grip was iron. "Hush now." We're just going to have a bit of fun." They emerged into the full moonlight just as the mating ceremony concluded. Hundreds of pack members filled the clearing, their attention turning toward the feast tables laden with food and drink. Musicians began to play, and the newly mated pair led the first dance. Callista dragged Sarah forward until they stood in a clear space near the center of the gathering. Too many eyes, Sarah thought desperately. Too much attention. "Everyone!" Callista called out, her voice ringing across the celebration. "My dear sister has been hiding all evening. I thought she should join the festivities properly." Sarah tried to tug free. "Callista, stop. But first, we should make sure she's properly dressed for such an important occasion." Callista's smile turned vicious. "After all, we wouldn't want her to embarrass our family in front of the Alpha King." It happened so fast that Sarah barely registered the movement. Callista's hand shot out, fingers tangling in the delicate fabric at Sarah's shoulder. With one violent yank, the dress tore. The sound of ripping cloth seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly silent clearing. Sarah gasped as the bodice separated, the borrowed dress splitting from shoulder to waist. She stumbled backward, clutching desperately at the ruined fabric to cover herself, but it was useless. The dress hung in tatters, exposing the thin chemise beneath and leaving her essentially bare before hundreds of staring wolves. Laughter erupted. Not from everyone. Some wolves looked away in embarrassment or disgust at Callista's cruelty, but enough that the sound crashed over Sarah like a wave. She stood frozen, humiliation burning through her so intensely that she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there with tears streaming down her face as the pack laughed at her exposure. "Oops," Callista said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I'm so sorry, sister. These dresses are so delicate. Perhaps you should have stayed in the shadows where you belong." More laughter. Someone shouted something crude. Sarah's vision blurred with tears as she tried desperately to hold the ruined dress together, but her hands were shaking too badly. This was it. The final humiliation that would cement her position as the pack's outcast forever. Then the laughter stopped. Not gradually, but all at once, as if someone had cut the strings on a puppet. The silence that fell was absolute, broken only by the crackling of the ceremonial fires. Sarah blinked tears from her eyes and saw that every wolf in the clearing had gone utterly still. They weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking past her, their eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Sarah turned, still clutching her ruined dress, and found herself staring at a broad chest covered in black ceremonial robes. She looked up. The Alpha King stood before her, his amber eyes blazing with an intensity that made her knees weak. This close, she could see that his face was younger than she'd thought, perhaps 30, but held the kind of authority that came from absolute power. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his dark hair was pulled back to reveal the strong line of his jaw. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Shock? Recognition? Something else entirely? Then, without a word, he reached up and unfastened the clasp at his throat. The ceremonial cloak, worth more than Sarah's cottage, probably worth more than her entire life, fell from his shoulders into his hands. Time seemed to slow as he stepped forward and draped the heavy fur across Sarah's shoulders. The cloak was massive, drowning her small frame, but it was warm and smelled of pine and smoke, and something wild that made her wolf, the part of her she'd always tried to suppress, stir for the first time in years. The Alpha King's hands lingered on her shoulders as he secured the clasp at her throat. His fingers brushed her skin, and Sarah felt a jolt of something electric race through her body. His eyes widened fractionally, and she knew he'd felt it too. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, carrying easily across the silent clearing. "This woman," he said, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face, "is under my protection. Anyone who harms her in any way answers to me." The clearing remained frozen in shocked silence. Sarah could feel hundreds of eyes boring into her back, could sense the confusion and disbelief radiating from the pack. Then the Alpha King did something that made her heart stop. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, formal and deliberate. When he raised his head, his amber eyes had shifted to something else entirely, a glowing gold that seemed to burn in the moonlight. "You're coming with me," he said quietly, meant only for her ears. Then louder for the assembled pack. "She's mine." The words hung in the air like a pronouncement of fate. Sarah's mind reeled, unable to process what was happening. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in all the territories, had just claimed her. In front of everyone. In front of Callista, whose face had gone white with rage. In front of her father, who stood near the front of the crowd with his mouth hanging open in shock. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. The Alpha King's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You will," he promised. Then he turned to address the pack's alpha, who'd hurried forward with obvious concern. "Thank you for your hospitality, Alpha Garrett. However, I'll be departing tonight, immediately." "Of course, Your Majesty," Alpha Garrett stammered. "Whatever you require." "I require safe passage to the border and a horse for the lady." His hand remained on Sarah's shoulder, warm and heavy and impossibly grounding. "We leave within the hour." Sarah had never ridden a horse before. This fact became painfully obvious within the first mile as she struggled to maintain her seat on the massive gray mare the Silver Moon pack had provided. The Alpha King rode beside her on a black stallion that seemed barely controlled, matching his rider's barely leashed power. They traveled with a small escort, 6 of the Alpha King's personal guards, all of whom kept a respectful distance behind their king and his. What was she exactly? Sarah still didn't understand what had happened at the ceremony, what the Alpha King's public claim meant, or why her entire life had just been upended in a matter of minutes. The ceremonial cloak remained wrapped around her shoulders, both blessing and burden. It marked her as under the Alpha King's protection, but it also weighed heavily with implications she didn't dare consider. "You're afraid of me?" The Alpha King's voice startled her so badly that she nearly lost her seat. He'd been silent since they'd left the pack lands, his face an unreadable mask in the darkness. They'd been riding for 2 hours, following a path that led deeper into the wilderness, away from settlements and toward the wild lands that bordered the northern territories. Sarah's voice caught. "I don't know what I am, Your Majesty." "Kale," he said. "When we're alone, you may call me Kale." The intimacy of his given name felt dangerous on her tongue. "I don't understand why you helped me. Why you claimed me in front of everyone. I'm nobody. I'm not even—" She cut herself off before she could say it. "Not even what?" His amber eyes found hers in the moonlight, and Sarah felt that same electric jolt from before. "Not even a real wolf," she whispered. "Not according to my pack. My mother was— They say her bloodline was tainted. That's why I've never shifted, never felt the full moon's call like other wolves do. I'm defective." Kale's expression darkened. "That's not a defect. It's power you haven't learned to use yet." "How would you know?" The words escaped before Sarah could stop them, tinged with years of suppressed bitterness. "You don't know anything about me?" "Don't I?" He pulled his stallion closer until they rode side by side, so close that Sarah could feel the heat radiating from him. "Tell me, Sarah Thorne. Yes, I made it my business to learn your name. Have you always been able to feel other wolves' emotions? Know when they're lying? Sense danger before it arrives?" Sarah's breath caught. How did you—" "Because those aren't the signs of a defective wolf," Kale said softly. "Those are the signs of something much rarer, much more powerful." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Tell me about your mother." "She died when I was 8. I barely remember her." Sarah's throat tightened. "She was kind, gentle. She used to sing to me at night, old songs in a language I didn't understand. My father said she was from a smaller pack, that she'd come to Silvermoon seeking sanctuary. But she never talked about her past, and after she died, my father remarried quickly. Callista's mother made sure I understood that I should be grateful for their charity." "Your mother's songs," Kale said. "Were they in the old tongue?" Sarah blinked. "I don't know. Maybe. They sounded ancient." Kyle was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. 20 years ago, there was a purge. The old Alpha King, my father, believed that certain bloodlines were too dangerous to exist. He ordered the elimination of any wolf descended from the first packs, the ancient bloodlines that carried the old magic. Ice spread through Sarah's veins. Why? Because the first pack wolves could do things modern wolves cannot. They could heal with a touch, influence the weather, communicate with all beasts, not just other wolves. My father feared their power, so he destroyed them. Kale's jaw clenched. I was young when it happened, too young to stop it. But I've spent the 10 years since his death trying to find any survivors, trying to undo some of the damage he caused. "You think my mother was from a first-pack bloodline?" Sarah whispered. "I know she was." Kale's eyes met hers, and in them, Sarah saw certainty. "I've been tracking rumors of a woman who escaped the purge and went into hiding. A woman with unusual abilities who died of a mysterious illness that no healer could cure. A woman who left behind a daughter." "The illness?" Sarah's hands trembled on the reins. "They said it came on suddenly. She was fine one day, and then she was coughing blood. It took her in 3 days." "Wolfsbane poisoning," Kale said grimly. "Someone found her. Someone who knew what she was and decided to finish what my father started." The implications crashed over Sarah like a wave. Her mother had been murdered. Murdered for the crime of existing, of carrying old magic in her blood. And if Sarah had inherited that magic— "I'm in danger," she said flatly. "You were in danger," Kale corrected. "Now you're under my protection. And I promise you, Sarah Thorne, no one will harm you while I draw breath." His vehemence startled her. "But why? Why do you care about one half-blood wolf?" Kyle opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. Something flickered across his face. Conflict? Desire? Fear? "Let's stop here for the night," he said instead. "We'll camp by the river up ahead. You need rest." But as they dismounted and his guards began setting up camp, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been about to say something important. Something that would explain the electric connection she felt whenever he touched her, the way her skin seemed to burn where his fingers had brushed. The guards built a fire while Kyle tended to the horses. Sarah sat on a fallen log, still wrapped in his cloak, and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, she'd been the pack outcast, barely tolerated by her own family. Now she was traveling with the Alpha King, protected by his public claim, and apparently descended from a bloodline powerful enough to have been hunted to extinction. "Here!" Kale appeared beside her, holding a water skin and some dried meat. Sarah accepted them gratefully, suddenly aware of how hungry and thirsty she was. "Thank you," she murmured. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. In the firelight, his face looked softer, younger, almost vulnerable. "I should explain what happened at the ceremony," he said quietly. "What it means that I claimed you publicly." Sarah's heart began to race. "All right." In the old laws, the ones that predate modern pack politics, when an alpha publicly claims someone under his protection, it's binding. No other wolf can challenge that claim without challenging the alpha directly. By covering you with my cloak, by stating my protection, I've effectively declared that you're under my personal guard. And when you said I was yours? The words came out barely above a whisper. Kale's eyes found hers, and Sarah saw something burning in their depths. Something hungry and possessive and terrifying in its intensity. That, he said softly, was not part of the formal protection claim. Then what was it? Before he could answer, one of the guards called out a warning. Cal was on his feet instantly, his body shifting into a protective stance between Sarah and the darkness beyond the firelight. "Stay behind me," he ordered, and for the first time since they'd met, Sarah heard his voice carry the full weight of his authority. Something was moving in the shadows. Multiple somethings, circling their camp with predatory intent. Then the wind shifted, and Sarah caught their scent. Wolves, but not pack wolves. These smelled wrong, sick and twisted like rotting meat. "Rogues," one of the guards hissed. "At least a dozen." Kale's body began to shift, muscles rippling as he prepared to transform. But before he could complete the change, Sarah felt something strange stirring inside her. A warmth that started in her chest and spread outward, making her skin tingle and her vision sharpen. The Alpha King turned to look at her, surprise crossing his features. "Sarah, your eyes." She raised her hand and saw that it was glowing with a soft aureate light. The same brilliance she'd seen once before, years ago, when she'd accidentally healed a bird with a broken wing. The luminescence her stepmother had beaten her for, calling it unnatural and evil. The rogues emerged from the shadows, their eyes reflecting red in the firelight. 12 of them, all scarred and wild-looking, their lips pulled back in snarls that revealed yellowed fangs. And Sarah, who had never felt the pull of the moon, who had never shifted, who had been called defective her entire life, felt power rising within her like a tide. The lead rogue lunged. Sarah extended her hand instinctively, and shimmering energy exploded from her palm in a wave that sent the rogue flying backward into a tree with a sickening crack. The clearing fell silent except for the crackling of the fire and Sarah's ragged breathing. She stared at her still glowing hand in shock. Behind her, she heard Kale's voice, rough with an emotion she couldn't name. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're not just first-pack bloodline. You're something else entirely." The remaining rogues scattered into the night, apparently deciding that whatever Sarah was, she wasn't worth dying over. But Sarah barely noticed their retreat. She was too busy staring at her hands, watching the radiance slowly fade, feeling the power receding back into whatever hidden place it had lived all these years. "What am I?" she whispered. Kale moved to stand in front of her, his gaze burning with that same luminous intensity she'd just wielded. "You," he said, his voice filled with wonder and something that sounded like reverence, "are my mate." The word hung in the air between them like a living thing. Mate. Sarah's mind rejected it instantly. Mates were for real wolves, for powerful alphas and carefully chosen partners who could strengthen bloodlines and forge political alliances. Mates were not for half-blood outcasts who couldn't even shift. "No," she said, stumbling backward. "That's not possible. I'm not... You can't..." "Sarah..." Kale's voice was gentle but firm. "Look at me." She didn't want to. Looking at him made the heat in her chest flare brighter, made her skin prickle with awareness, made her want things she had no right to want. But her eyes betrayed her, drawn to his face like moths to flame. His eyes were still glowing that impossible gold, but as she watched, they slowly faded back to amber. "I felt it the moment I saw you," he murmured. "Even before your stepsister attacked you, before you looked up at me, I felt it. The bond snapped into place like a physical thing, and I knew. You're my mate, Sarah. My true mate." But how? Sarah's voice broke. I'm nobody. I'm defective. I can't even shift properly. You just threw a fully grown rogue wolf 30 feet with your mind, Kale pointed out. I wouldn't call that defective. One of the guards, a grizzled man with silver threading through his dark hair, cleared his throat. Your Majesty, perhaps we should move camp. Where there's one pack of rogues, there are usually more. Kale nodded without taking his eyes off Sarah. Agreed. We ride for Thornhaven. It's another hour north, but the fortress walls will provide better protection. He turned to his guards. Break camp. We leave in 5 minutes. The men moved with practiced efficiency, dousing the fire and gathering supplies. Sarah stood frozen, her mind still reeling from Kale's declaration. Mate. She was supposedly the mate of the most powerful alpha in all the territories. It was absurd, impossible. And yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, the way her body responded to his presence. Even now, standing several feet away, she could feel the invisible thread connecting them, drawing her closer. I don't understand any of this, she whispered as Kale helped her back onto her horse. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Sarah felt heat bloom where he touched her. I know, he said softly. I'll explain everything once we reach Thornhaven. You'll be safe there, and we can... He cut off abruptly, his head snapping toward the south. The guards reacted instantly, hands moving to weapons, bodies tensing for threat. More rogues? Sarah asked, her heart hammering. Worse. Kale's expression had gone cold and hard. Hunters. Sarah caught the scent a moment later, human, but wrong somehow. Tainted with silver and wolfsbane and death. What are hunters doing this far into pack territory? Hunting, Kale said grimly. Mount up. Now. They rode hard through the darkness, the horses' hooves pounding against the forest floor. Sarah clung to her mare's mane, terrified she'd be thrown, but somehow she managed to keep her seat. Behind them, she could hear pursuit. Multiple horses, at least 6 or 7, gaining ground steadily. They're getting closer, one of the guards called out. Kale cursed under his breath. The horses are tired. We won't outrun them. He turned to Sarah, his expression fierce. When I give the signal, you ride straight for Thornhaven. Don't look back. Don't stop for anything. My guards will hold them off. What? No. Sarah's protest was immediate. I'm not leaving you to fight them alone. You don't have a choice. Kale's voice carried the weight of command. You're too important to risk. Important? Sarah nearly laughed. I've been worthless my entire life, and now suddenly I'm too important to risk? That's... An arrow whistled past her head, missing by inches. Go! Kyle roared, and slapped her horse's flank hard enough to send the mare bolting forward. Sarah tried to pull back on the reins, tried to turn around, but the horse had the bit between her teeth and was running flat out. Behind her, she heard the clash of battle, snarls and screams and the ring of metal on metal. I have to go back, she thought desperately. I can't just leave them. But even as the thought formed, she felt something strange happening inside her. The luminous energy from before was stirring again, rising up through her chest and spreading through her limbs. It felt different this time. Not defensive like before, but searching, reaching out for something. Sarah's breath caught as the radiance suddenly surged, and her vision exploded with new sensations. She could feel Kale, not just his presence, but his emotions, his fear for her safety, his determination to protect her at any cost, his barely controlled rage at the hunters who dared threaten his mate. The bond. She was feeling their mate bond, and through that bond, she felt the exact moment an arrow found its mark in Kale's shoulder. No! The scream tore from Sarah's throat as she felt his pain echo through the connection, Without conscious thought, she yanked hard on the reins, forcing the mare to wheel around. The horse fought her, but Sarah's desperate strength won out, and they were galloping back toward the battle. The scene she rode into was chaos. Kale's guards had engaged the hunters in close combat, swords against crossbows and silver-tipped spears. But the hunters outnumbered them, and more were emerging from the forest. Kale stood in the center of the carnage, partially shifted with claws extended and fangs bared, an arrow protruding from his left shoulder. 3 hunters circled him with silver nets, clearly planning to capture rather than kill. Sarah didn't think. She simply acted. The radiant power burst from her like a supernova, expanding outward in a wave that sent every hunter flying backward. They crashed into trees and rocks, their weapons clattering to the ground. Several didn't get back up. But Sarah wasn't finished. The energy flowing through her felt endless, ancient, like tapping into something that had been waiting her entire life to be released. She raised her hands and the earth itself responded, roots erupting from the ground to entangle the remaining hunters, holding them fast. Then she was off her horse and running to Kale, whose amber eyes were wide with shock and something that looked like awe. "You came back," he said hoarsely. "You foolish, brave, magnificent woman. You came back." "Of course I did." Sarah's hands were shaking as she examined the arrow. "You're my—" She stopped, the word catching in her throat. "Your mate," Kale finished softly. "Say it, Sarah." Acknowledge the bond. She met his eyes, and in them saw her future written. A future she'd never dared imagine, where she wasn't worthless or defective, where her power was celebrated instead of feared, where she belonged to someone and they belonged to her. "My mate," she whispered. The bond flared to life between them, visible now as threads of shimmering light connecting their hearts. Sarah gasped at the intensity of it, at the flood of emotions that poured through the connection. Kale's love, fierce and protective. His pride in her strength, his desperate need to keep her safe, and underneath it all, a hunger that made her skin flush with heat. "The arrow," she managed, trying to focus. "I need to remove it." "Not here." Kale's voice was rough. "We need to reach Thornhaven first. I'll survive until then." His guards had secured the area, binding the conscious hunters and checking the dead. The silver-haired guard approached, his expression carefully neutral despite the wonder in his eyes. "Your Majesty," he said, "the lady, what she did, is to remain absolutely secret," Kale said sharply. "On pain of death, Marcus. No one outside this group speaks of what they saw tonight." Marcus bowed deeply. "Of course, Your Majesty. The men understand." He paused. "But if I may say so, sire, the old prophecies spoke of a queen who would wield the ancient light, a queen who would stand beside the king and usher in a new age for our kind." Kale's eyes found Sarah's. So they did. "I'm not a queen," Sarah protested weakly. "Not yet," Kyle agreed. "But you will be. If you'll have me." Before Sarah could process what he was asking, a new scent carried on the wind made every wolf present freeze. "No," Marcus breathed. "It can't be." Sarah turned toward the forest, her new senses picking up something massive approaching, something that made every instinct she possessed scream danger. A figure emerged from the shadows between the trees, tall, wrapped in tattered robes, face hidden beneath a deep hood. But what sent fear coursing through her was the aura of wrongness surrounding it. Dark magic that felt like the opposite of her radiant power. Kale Nightborn. The voice was neither male nor female, ancient and hollow. "You found her at last. The last daughter of the first moon. How inconvenient." Kyle moved in front of Sarah despite his injury, his body radiating protective fury. "Identify yourself." The figure laughed, a sound like bones rattling. I am the one who completed your father's work. The one who tracked down every last first pack wolf and eliminated them. The hood tilted towards Sarah. I thought I'd gotten them all. But it seems one little half-breed slipped through my fingers. Horror crashed over Sarah as understanding dawned. You killed my mother. Among others. The figure sounded almost bored. 23 first-pack wolves, to be precise. Your mother was the last one. Or so I thought. Rage, unlike anything Sarah had ever felt, surged through her. The luminous energy erupted from her skin, no longer just emanating from her hands but covering her entire body in brilliant flames. Easy, Kyle murmured, his hand finding hers. Don't let emotion control the power. But Sarah barely heard him. She was advancing on the hooded figure, power building with each step. You murdered innocent people. You murdered my mother for the crime of existing. I eliminated threats to the natural order. The figure raised one pale hand, and dark energy began to swirl around its fingers. Your kind should never have existed. Wolves were meant to be simple creatures, strong, savage, pure. The first packs corrupted that purity with their magic and their arts. Your mother understood in the end. She died knowing her kind had no place in this world. You're wrong. Sarah's voice rang out clear and strong. You're wrong, and I'm going to prove it. The luminescence exploded from her in a beam of pure energy that struck the dark figure square in the chest. The figure staggered but didn't fall, its own dark magic rising to meet her attack. Sarah, stop! Kyle's voice cut through her rage. You're not ready for this fight. Your power is raw, untrained. You'll burn yourself out. He was right. Sarah could already feel the strain, the way the radiance was draining something essential from her. But she couldn't stop. This creature had murdered her mother, had hunted down an entire bloodline, and would continue killing if she didn't stop it here. The dark figure laughed again. The pup has teeth. How delightful. But you're no match for me, child. I've been perfecting my art for decades while you've been living in ignorance of what you are. Dark tendrils shot toward Sarah like striking snakes. She threw up a shield of light instinctively, and the darkness shattered against it, but the impact drove her to her knees. Sarah! Kyle was beside her in an instant, his own power flaring as he shifted fully into his wolf form. The Alpha King's wolf was magnificent, massive and black as midnight, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. He lunged at the dark figure with a snarl that shook the earth, but the figure simply vanished, dissolving into shadows. This isn't over, its voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. The girl dies, just like her mother. Just like all her corrupted kind, it's only a matter of time. Then the presence was gone, leaving only the night wind and the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. Kale shifted back to human form and gathered her into his arms. Are you all right? Are you hurt? Sarah shook her head, but tears were streaming down her face. My mother. All those people. They died because of what they were. And you will live, Kale said fiercely, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. I swear it on my life, Sarah. That creature will never touch you. No one will ever hurt you again. Sarah wanted to believe him, but as they remounted and finally rode for Thornhaven, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever she was, whatever power flowed through her veins, it made her a target. And somewhere in the darkness, a hunter was already planning its next move. Thornhaven was not what Sarah expected. She'd imagined a fortress, cold stone walls and militant guards, the kind of place that screamed power and authority. Instead, as they crested the final hill just before dawn, she found herself looking at something that resembled a small city carved into the mountainside itself. Warm lights glowed from hundreds of windows. Gardens terraced down the slopes, even in the pre-dawn darkness showing signs of careful cultivation. And the walls, while certainly formidable, were covered in climbing vines that softened their martial appearance. "Home," Cale said quietly beside her, and Sarah heard genuine affection in his voice. They were met at the gates by a flurry of activity. Healers rushed forward to attend to Cale's arrow wound and the various injuries his guards had sustained. Stable hands took the exhausted horses. And through it all, Sarah felt the weight of curious stares from dozens of wolves who'd emerged to witness the Alpha King's unexpected return. "Your Majesty," an elderly woman with silver hair braided in an intricate crown approached, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of the scene. "We received no word of your early return. And you bring a guest." "Not a guest, Thea." Cale's arm remained around Sarah's waist, supporting her as exhaustion from using her power finally caught up with her. "My mate." The word sent a ripple through the assembled wolves. Sarah heard gasps, whispers, felt the intensity of their scrutiny increase tenfold. Thea's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "Your mate." "I see." Her gaze fixed on Sarah with penetrating intensity. "And does your mate have a name?" "Sarah Thorne," Sarah managed, though her voice came out barely above a whisper. I was. "She's exhausted," Cale interrupted firmly. "Explanations can wait. Thea, prepare the Luna's chambers, and send for healer Dimitri. I need him to examine Sarah immediately." "The Luna's chambers?" Thea's expression showed clear surprise. "Your Majesty, perhaps it would be more appropriate—" "The Luna's chambers," Cale repeated, his voice carrying the weight of command. "She is my mate, Thea. That makes her your future queen. She will be treated accordingly." Thea bowed, though Sarah caught the calculating look in her eyes. "As you command, Your Majesty." The Luna's chambers turned out to be a suite of rooms that took Sarah's breath away. High ceilings carved with intricate wolf motifs. Windows overlooked the valley below, now showing the first pink streaks of dawn. Furniture that was both elegant and comfortable, and a bed large enough to sleep 4 people. "This is too much," Sarah protested as servants bustled around, lighting fires and preparing a bath. "I can't possibly—" "You can. And you will." Cale had finally allowed a healer to remove the arrow from his shoulder, and now stood shirtless while another healer cleaned and bandaged the wound. Sarah tried not to stare at the expanse of his chest, at the play of muscles beneath tanned skin, at the various scars that marked him as a warrior. Their eyes met, and Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks as she realized he'd caught her looking. Something predatory flickered in his expression before he controlled it. "You should rest," he said, his voice rough. "We'll talk more once you've recovered from—" "No." Sarah surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "No more delays. You said you'd explain everything once we reached Thornhaven." "Well, we're here. I want answers." Cale studied her for a long moment, then dismissed the healers and servants with a wave of his hand. Once they were alone, he moved to stand before the windows, his back to her. "My father," he began quietly, "was not a good man. He was powerful, ruthless, and paranoid. He saw threats everywhere, particularly in anyone whose abilities exceeded normal wolf standards." He turned to face her. The first packs were his greatest fear. They predated the modern pack system by thousands of years, and their magic was something he could never control or understand. "So he killed them all," Sarah said flatly. "He tried. 20 years ago, he ordered what he called the purification. Every wolf with confirmed or suspected first pack heritage was to be eliminated. He sent hunters, humans he'd corrupted with dark magic, making them specifically lethal to supernatural beings." Cale's hands clenched into fists. "I was 16. Too young to challenge him, too weak to stop what he'd set in motion. But I swore that when I became king, I would undo his damage." How many did he kill? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Kyle's voice was heavy with old grief. The first packs had been scattered and hidden for generations, but my father's hunters were thorough. They tracked bloodlines, investigated rumors, tortured suspects until they revealed others. It was systematic genocide. Sarah felt sick. And my mother? Survived longer than most because she went deep into hiding. She changed her name, suppressed her abilities, married a low-ranking wolf from an unremarkable pack. For 8 years, she managed to stay invisible. Kyle's amber eyes met hers. Then someone found her. Someone who's been hunting first-pack survivors even after my father's death. The creature from the forest, Sarah whispered. The one with dark magic. I've been tracking it for years, but it's always one step ahead. It knows how to hide, how to strike, and disappear. Kale moved closer to her. But now it's made a mistake. It revealed itself because of you. Because I'm bait. The realization was bitter. You want to use me to draw it out. No. Kyle's response was immediate and fierce. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face with surprising gentleness. Never. I want to keep you safe, which means I need to understand exactly what you are. The power you displayed tonight, that wasn't just first-pack magic, Sarah. That was something more. How can you know that? Because I've studied the old texts. I've spent years researching first-pack abilities, hoping to find survivors, and none of the records mention anything like what you did. Throwing fully grown wolves with your mind, making the earth itself obey your commands. His thumbs stroked her cheekbones, and Sarah felt her breath catch. The prophecies spoke of a queen, born once in a millennium, carrying the combined power of all first packs in her blood. A queen who would either save our kind or destroy it. That's insane, Sarah breathed. I'm nobody. I'm just... You're the other half of my soul. Kale's forehead rested against hers. You're my mate, and you're possibly the most powerful wolf ever born. Those are the only facts that matter. Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed by his proximity, by the mate bond singing between them, by the impossible weight of his words. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. Then we'll figure it out together. Kale pulled back slightly, his expression softening. But first, you need to rest. You nearly drained yourself completely using that much power. Another few minutes, and you could have... His jaw clenched. Just rest. Please. Sarah wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. Will you stay? The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. But the thought of being alone in this strange place, with threats she didn't understand closing in, was terrifying. Kyle's expression gentled. Always, he promised. I'll be right here. Sleep, Sarah. You're safe now. She let him guide her to the enormous bed, barely aware of him removing her boots and covering her with soft blankets. The last thing she felt before darkness claimed her was his hand holding hers, solid and reassuring. And for the first time in her life, Sarah fell asleep feeling protected. But her dreams were troubled. She saw the hooded figure again, its dark magic spreading like a plague across the territories. She saw wolves dying, first-pack survivors hunted down one by one. And through it all, she heard a voice, ancient and cold, whispering a single phrase over and over. The purge is not complete. It will never be complete until the daughter of the first moon is dead. Sarah woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. Sunlight streamed through the windows. She'd slept the entire day. Kale sat in a chair beside the bed, reading from an ancient tome, but his attention snapped to her immediately. Nightmare? He asked gently. Warning, Sarah corrected, her voice shaking. The creature. The hunter. It's not working alone, Kale. There are others. And they won't stop until I'm dead. Kale's expression darkened, but before he could respond, urgent knocking sounded at the door. Thea entered without waiting for permission, her face pale. Your Majesty, the council demands an immediate audience. They've learned about your companion, and they are not pleased. Sarah woke to raised voices beyond her chamber doors. Absolutely unacceptable. You can't seriously expect us to. I expect you to show respect to your future queen. Kale's voice, cold with authority. Or have you forgotten who you're addressing? Forgive me, Your Majesty, but the council has concerns. This girl appears from nowhere, claims to be your mate, and you expect us to simply accept. I don't recall asking for acceptance. I'm informing you of reality. Sarah sat up, her head pounding. The nightmare from earlier still clung to her thoughts. Images of the hooded hunter, of wolves dying, of darkness spreading. She pushed it aside and forced herself out of bed, wrapping one of the blankets around her shoulders like a shawl. The voices grew louder, more heated. Sarah moved to the door and eased it open to find Kale facing off against 3 older wolves, 2 men and a woman, all dressed in formal robes that suggested high rank. The law is clear, the woman was saying, her tone sharp. Any wolf claiming to be the Alpha King's mate must prove their worth before the council. We cannot have just anyone. Just anyone. Kale's voice dropped to a dangerous purr. Choose your next words carefully, Counselor Vera. Vera lifted her chin, and Sarah noticed something cold and calculating in her eyes. A wolf of unknown parentage, untested abilities, and questionable bloodline. Yes, Your Majesty, I said what I said. The mate bond can be faked with the right magic. We've seen it before. You doubt my ability to recognize my own mate? I doubt nothing about you, sire. But I doubt her. Vera's cold eyes found Sarah in the doorway. Ah, the subject of our discussion awakens. Tell me, girl, what pack do you hail from? Sarah's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to step forward. Silver Moon Pack. My father is Beta Thorn. Beta Thorn. One of the male counselors consulted a ledger. Married to Meredith of the Eastern Valley Pack. 2 daughters, Callista and... no mention of a Sarah. I'm his daughter from his first wife, Sarah said, hating how defensive she sounded. She died when I was young. How convenient, Vera said coldly, and something in her expression made Sarah's skin crawl. There was a flicker of something in the counselor's eyes. Recognition, perhaps? As if she knew more about Sarah's mother than she was saying. And this first wife? What was her name? What pack did she belong to? Sarah opened her mouth and realized she didn't know. Her father had always deflected questions about her mother's origins, and after his remarriage, speaking of her, had been forbidden. She has no answer, the other male counselor noted. Your Majesty, surely you see the problem. We know nothing verifiable about this girl's heritage. For all we know, she could be a plant from a rival pack, using dark magic to simulate a mate bond and gain access to... Enough. Kale's voice cracked like a whip. Sarah is my mate. That is not negotiable, not questionable, and not subject to council approval. Then you won't object to her proving it, Vera said smoothly, and Sarah saw the trap closing. The counselor's smile held something predatory, something that suggested she'd been planning this. The traditional trial for potential queens, 3 tests to demonstrate strength, wisdom, and power. If she is truly your destined mate, she'll pass easily. Kale's expression darkened. The trials are dangerous. Wolves have died attempting them. Then perhaps she isn't meant to be queen. Vera's smile was sharp as broken glass. Unless Your Majesty believes his mate is too weak to handle a few simple tests. It was a trap, and they all knew it. If Kale refused to let Sarah attempt the trials, it would look like he doubted her abilities. If he agreed and she failed, or worse, was injured, he would appear to have sacrificed her for political expediency. "I'll do it," Sarah heard herself say. Every head turned toward her. Kyle's expression was thunderous. "Sarah, numero. You don't understand what they're asking." "I understand perfectly." Sarah moved to stand beside him, drawing strength from his presence. "They think I'm using you. They think I'm weak, or false, or both. So I'll prove them wrong." She met Vera's cold gaze directly, noticing something familiar in the counselor's eyes, a darkness that reminded her of the hooded hunter. "When do the trials begin?" Vera's smile widened, and in that moment, Sarah was certain. This woman knew more about her mother's death than she was saying. "Tomorrow at dawn. That gives you one night to prepare, or to run, if wisdom prevails over pride." After the counselors departed, Cale rounded on Sarah with barely controlled fury. "Do you have any idea what you just agreed to? The trials aren't some ceremonial nonsense. They're designed to test a wolf to their absolute limits. Wolves have died, Sarah. Strong, trained wolves with years of experience." "What choice did I have?" Sarah shot back, her own anger rising. "Let them call you a liar. Let them claim our bond is fake. I won't be the reason your authority is undermined." "My authority means nothing compared to your safety." Cale's hands gripped her shoulders. "You've had your powers for less than 2 days, Sarah. You barely understand what you can do, let alone how to control it under pressure." "Then teach me." Sarah met his fierce gaze without flinching. "We have one night. Help me survive this." For a long moment, Cale simply stared at her. Then his expression shifted, frustration giving way to something that looked like pride. "You're not going to back down, are you?" "Would you?" A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "No, I suppose I wouldn't." He released her shoulders, but his hands slid down to capture hers. "All right. We have until dawn. Let's see what you're capable of." They spent the evening in a private training courtyard hidden deep within Thornhaven. Cale proved to be a demanding teacher, pushing Sarah to call upon her power again and again until she could summon it without the catalyst of extreme emotion. "The radiance is just the visible manifestation," he explained as Sarah successfully lifted a training dummy 3 feet off the ground with her mind. "The real power is in your will. You're not just moving objects, you're imposing your will on reality itself." "That sounds insane," Sarah panted, sweat dripping down her face despite the cool evening air. "Welcome to First Pack Magic." Cale handed her a water skin. "Modern wolves can shift and heal faster than humans, but that's where our magic ends. First Pack wolves could do things we can't even imagine, and you—" He paused, his expression troubled. "You're operating on a level beyond even them." "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet." Cale's honesty was almost worse than a lie would have been. Power without control is dangerous, but you're learning faster than should be possible. It's like your body already knows what to do, like muscle memory awakening. They trained late into the night until Sarah's legs trembled with exhaustion and her head pounded from the strain of using her abilities. She practiced lifting heavier objects, creating shields of light, even manipulating small amounts of earth and stone. Each success came easier than the last, as if the power was waking up more fully with each use. Cale finally called a halt when she nearly collapsed after creating a dome of protective light around them both. Her body was screaming for rest. "Enough," he said firmly, catching her before she could fall. "You need rest more than practice now." Sarah wanted to argue, but her body was trembling with exhaustion. Cale carried her back to their chambers and laid her gently on the bed. "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail and prove them right?" Kyle stretched out beside her, fully clothed, and pulled her against his chest. The mate bond hummed between them, soothing some of her anxiety. "You won't fail," he murmured against her hair. "Do you know how I know?" "How?" "Because you're mine, and I don't choose weak mates." His arms tightened around her. "Sleep now, Sarah. Tomorrow, you show them exactly who you are." Sleep was slow to come. Sarah lay in Cale's arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, trying not to think about all the ways the trials could go wrong. When she finally did sleep, her dreams were filled with radiant power and ancient voices singing in languages she didn't know but somehow understood. And in those dreams, she saw Vera's face, twisted with hatred. But beneath the hatred was fear, terror of what Sarah represented. The counselor wasn't just prejudiced against first-pack wolves. She was actively working to eliminate them. Dawn came far too quickly. Sarah stood in the center of Thornhaven's main arena, surrounded by hundreds of watching wolves. The council sat in judgment seats above, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Vera's face held barely concealed satisfaction, as if she already knew how this would end. And beside them, forced to watch, but forbidden to interfere, sat Cale, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Through their bond, she felt his faith in her, his love, his barely controlled fury at being unable to help. Counselor Vera stood, her voice carrying across the arena. "Sarah Thorne, you stand before this council to prove your worth as mate to our king. You will face 3 trials: strength, wisdom, and power. Fail any trial, and your claim will be rejected. Succeed in all 3, and you will be recognized as our Luna." She paused dramatically. "Are you prepared to begin?" Sarah's mouth was dry, her heart hammering against her ribs. But she thought of her mother, hunted and killed for daring to exist. She thought of all the first-pack wolves who'd been murdered for being different. And she thought of Cale, watching her with such fierce belief in his eyes. "I'm ready," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Vera's smile was cold and triumphant. "Then let the first trial begin." The arena floor began to tremble. Sarah stumbled as the ground beneath her feet cracked open, and from the widening fissure emerged something that sent fear coursing through her. A creature of living stone, easily 15 feet tall, with eyes that glowed like hot coals. An earth elemental, summoned specifically to test her strength. And as it raised one massive fist to strike, Sarah realized that the council, or at least Vera, wasn't just testing her. They were trying to kill her. The earth elemental's fist came down like a meteor. Sarah threw herself sideways, rolling across the arena floor as stone pulverized the spot where she'd been standing. Dust and debris exploded outward, and she heard the crowd gasp, whether in excitement or horror, she couldn't tell. "First trial, strength." Vera's voice rang out. "Defeat the elemental using only your physical abilities. Magic is forbidden in this test." Of course it is, Sarah thought bitterly, scrambling to her feet as the creature turned toward her with grinding slowness. "They want to prove I'm weak." The elemental charged, faster than something made of stone had any right to move. Sarah dove behind one of the arena's stone pillars, her mind racing. Strength. She needed strength. But she'd never been strong. Even among the Silver Moon Pack, she'd been considered small and weak. The pillar exploded as the elemental smashed through it. Sarah ran, her lungs burning, trying to create distance, but the creature was relentless, pursuing her with single-minded determination. "I can't beat this thing." Panic clawed at her throat. "I can't." Then she felt it. The mate bond, warm and steady, carrying Cale's presence across the distance between them. And with it came a surge of strength that didn't come from magic. It came from the bond itself, from the connection between alpha and mate. "You're stronger than you know," Cale's voice echoed in her mind, clear as if he'd spoken aloud. Trust the bond. Trust yourself. The bond didn't just carry emotion, it could share power. Not magic, but the raw physical strength of an alpha wolf channeled through their connection. The elemental's fist swung toward her head. This time, instead of dodging, Sarah caught it. The impact drove her to one knee, but she held. Her arms trembled with the strain, but she held. And slowly, impossibly, she began to push back. The crowd erupted. Sarah heard their shock, their disbelief, but she couldn't focus on anything except the creature in front of her. She roared with effort and twisted, using the elemental's own momentum against it. The massive creature stumbled, off balance. Sarah didn't give it time to recover. She leaped onto its back, her hands finding purchase in the cracks of its stone body. The elemental thrashed, trying to throw her off, but she held tight. Then, remembering something from her childhood, watching her father train younger wolves, she found the elemental's weak point. Every construct had a core. She just had to find it. Her fingers dug between stone plates, searching until she felt something different. Warmth. Energy. There. Sarah gripped the core, a crystal pulsing with magical light, and pulled. The elemental froze mid-thrash, then it began to crumble, stone cascading away like sand until nothing remained but dust and the crystal in Sarah's hand. Silence blanketed the arena. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined until the sound became thunderous. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, covered in dust and bruises, holding the elemental's core above her head like a trophy. Her eyes found Kale's, and the pride she saw there made her chest tight with emotion. First trial, passed, Vera announced, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Proceed to the second trial. The arena floor shifted again, but this time, instead of opening, it transformed. Stone walls rose up, creating a complex maze that stretched in all directions. In the distance, Sarah could hear something moving through the passages, something with claws that scraped against stone. Second trial, wisdom, Vera called. Navigate the maze and retrieve the crown of thorns from its center. But beware, the maze is guarded by a sphinx, and it does not take kindly to fools. Sarah entered the maze, her hand trailing along the stone walls. The passages twisted and turned, branching off in multiple directions. She tried to keep track of her path, but after the fifth turn, she'd lost all sense of direction. Lost, little wolf? A voice purred from everywhere and nowhere. Spinning around, she saw nothing. Show yourself. As you wish. The Sphinx materialized from shadow, a creature with a woman's face, a lion's body, and eagle's wings. It was beautiful and terrifying, its eyes ancient and knowing. 3 riddles, the Sphinx said. Answer correctly, and I will guide you to the crown. Answer incorrectly. Its smile showed far too many teeth. Well, the maze is very good at disposing of failures. Ask your riddles, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. First riddle, I am born of light but cannot exist within it. I grow when darkness falls and flee when dawn breaks. What am I? Born of light but unable to exist in it, the answer came to her. A shadow, she said. The Sphinx's eyes gleamed. Clever. Second riddle. I have cities but no houses, forests but no trees, water but no fish. What am I? Closing her eyes, she puzzled through the second riddle. Cities without houses, forests without trees. A map, she finally said. 2 for 2. Most impressive. The Sphinx circled her slowly. But the third riddle is the most important. Answer wrong, and all your previous success means nothing. It leaned close, its breath hot against Sarah's face. What is the price of power? Sarah froze. This wasn't just a riddle. It was a test of character. The Sphinx wanted to know what she believed, what she valued. Power has many prices, Sarah said slowly. Responsibility, isolation, the weight of others' expectations. She met the Sphinx's ancient eyes. But the highest price of power is fear. Fear of losing it. Fear of using it wrong. Fear of what you might become if you let it control you instead of controlling it. The Sphinx was silent for a long moment. Then, to Sarah's shock, it bowed. You are wise beyond your years, little wolf. The crown is yours. It gestured with one paw, and the maze walls shifted, revealing a clear path to the center, where a circlet of twisted silver thorns rested on a pedestal. Sarah approached carefully, half expecting another trap. When her fingers closed around the crown, warmth spread through her hand. Not violent or overwhelming, but gentle, welcoming. As if the crown recognized her. She returned through the maze with the Sphinx as her guide, emerging to find the arena transformed once more. The maze had vanished, replaced by an open space, and standing in the center of that space, surrounded by a circle of burning torches, was a figure she recognized with cold dread. The hooded creature from the forest, the one who'd killed her mother. Third trial, power. Vera's voice held a note of savage satisfaction that confirmed Sarah's suspicions. Defeat the enemy before you using your full abilities. No restrictions, no mercy. The counselor hadn't just arranged these trials. She'd coordinated with the hunters. Vera was part of the conspiracy. The council has lost its mind, Kale's voice roared. He was on his feet, moving toward the arena, but 2 guards restrained him. This creature is a threat to all of us. You cannot. The trial has begun, Vera said coldly. And you know the law, Your Majesty. Once started, it cannot be stopped. The hooded figure laughed. How delightful. The council has done my work for me, and here I thought I'd have to infiltrate this fortress to kill the last first pack spawn. It raised its hands, dark energy crackling between its fingers. Any last words, child? Sarah set the crown of thorns on her head. The moment the silver touched her skin, something awakened fully. At first, it was subtle, a tingling warmth that spread from her temples through her entire body. Then the crown's ancient magic recognized her bloodline and surged to life, amplifying abilities she'd barely begun to understand. Luminous energy erupted from her body, so bright that wolves in the stands had to shield their eyes. Yes, Sarah said, her voice resonating with ancient power. You should have killed me when you had the chance. The dark creature struck first, sending tendrils of shadow magic racing toward Sarah like serpents. But this time, she was ready. Shields of light materialized around her, turning the darkness aside. Sarah didn't just deflect. She absorbed, taking the creature's own power and transforming it, purifying it with her brilliance. Impossible, the creature hissed. You're untrained. You shouldn't be able to... Sarah didn't let it finish. She extended both hands and brilliant chains erupted from the arena floor, wrapping around the creature's limbs. It shrieked, struggling against the bonds. You killed my mother, Sarah said, advancing slowly. You murdered innocent people for the crime of being born different. And for what? Fear? Hatred? The delusion that you were protecting anyone? They were abominations. The creature's voice rose to a shriek, corrupting the pure bloodlines with their magic and their what? Their compassion? Their healing? Their ability to live in harmony with nature instead of dominating it? Sarah's power flared brighter. You didn't eliminate threats. You eliminated hope. The glowing chains tightened and cracks began to appear in the creature's form, light seeping through like water through a breaking dam. If you kill me, there will be others, the creature spat. The purge continues. There are more hunters, more believers in the cause. Your kind will never be safe. Maybe not, Sarah agreed, but they'll never have to face you again. She released her power in a wave that washed over the creature like a tsunami. For a moment, the hooded figure was silhouetted against pure radiance. Then it screamed, a sound of such agony and rage that it seemed to shake the very foundations of Thornhaven. When the light faded, nothing remained but ash. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, the crown of thorns gleaming on her head, her whole body still glowing with residual power. The watching wolves were completely silent, shock written across every face. Then a single voice rose in a howl of recognition. Others joined until the entire arena rang with the sound of hundreds of wolves acknowledging their new queen. All except the council. Vera stood frozen, her face pale with fury and disbelief. This proves nothing. She could be corrupted by that same power. Who's to say she won't? Enough. Kyle's voice cut through the howling like a blade. He'd broken free from the guards and now stood at the arena's edge, his gaze burning with barely controlled fury. Sarah has passed all 3 trials. She has proven her strength, her wisdom, and her power. By your own laws, you must acknowledge her as my mate and your queen. The law also states, Vera began. I don't care what technicality you're about to cite. Cale vaulted over the arena wall and crossed to Sarah's side. His hand found hers, and the mate bond between them blazed so brightly that it became visible, threads of shimmering light connecting their hearts. She is mine, and I am hers. Challenge that bond again, and you challenge me directly. Is that what you want, counselor? Vera's jaw clenched, but she bowed her head. No, your majesty. Then kneel, Cale commanded. All of you, acknowledge your queen. One by one, the wolves in the arena dropped to their knees. Some did so gladly, others with obvious reluctance, but all complied. Even the council, though Vera looked like each movement caused her physical pain. Cale turned to Sarah, and his fierce expression softened. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Sarah nodded, though her legs felt like water and her head was spinning from power expenditure. I think so. But Cale, what that creature said? There are others. More hunters. The danger isn't over. I know. Kyle's hand cupped her cheek, but we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore, Sarah. You'll never be alone again. The crown of thorns pulsed with warmth, and suddenly Sarah understood what it was. Not just a ceremonial object, but a conduit. A way for her to connect with every wolf in Thornhaven, to feel their emotions, their loyalty, and their doubts. She could feel Vera's hatred like acid, could sense the fear many felt at her power. But she could also feel the hope, the wonder, the belief that maybe things could change. I know many of you are afraid, Sarah said, raising her voice to address the assembled wolves. I know what I am seems unnatural, dangerous. Believe me, I spent my whole life being told I was wrong, broken, defective. She met the eyes of those watching, refusing to look away. But being different doesn't make us wrong. My mother taught me that, even though she never spoke of her own heritage. She taught me through how she lived, with kindness, with compassion, with love, even for those who showed her none. Sarah took a breath, feeling the weight of hundreds of gazes. The wolves who came before us, the first packs, they weren't monsters. They were healers and teachers, artists and peacemakers. They were murdered for refusing to be what others wanted them to be. I won't let that happen again. Not to me, and not to anyone else. She looked at Cale, drawing strength from his presence. I'm not perfect. I'm still learning what I can do, still figuring out who I'm meant to be. But I promise you this, I will use every gift I have to protect our kind. All of us, modern pack wolves, and any first pack survivors who still hide in fear. We're stronger together than divided. The silence that followed was heavy with consideration. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a young wolf called out, "Long live Queen Sarah!" Others took up the cry. Not everyone. Sarah could still feel pockets of resistance, but enough that the words echoed through Thornhaven like a promise of change. As Kale led her from the arena, Sarah felt the crown of thorns settle more firmly on her head. No longer just metal and magic, but a symbol of what she'd become. She'd proven herself to Thornhaven's wolves. But even in her moment of triumph, she couldn't shake the murdered creature's final words echoing in her mind. There will be others. The purge continues. Through the mate bond, she felt Kale's tension. He'd heard it too. And from the shadows at the edge of the arena, she caught Vera's expression. Not defeat, but cold calculation. The counselor's lips moved silently, and Sarah realized with horror that she was speaking to someone through magic. Vera wasn't finished, and neither were the hunters. Through their bond, Kyle felt her alarm. His hand tightened on hers. "What is it?" he asked. But before Sarah could answer, a guard burst into the arena, his face pale with terror. "Your Majesty, the Eastern Wall, we're under attack. Dozens of hunters, maybe hundreds, and they've brought something worse." His voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "Chimeras. They've brought chimeras." Chaos erupted instantly. The crowd in the arena scattered as alarm bells began ringing throughout Thornhaven. Wolves shifted mid-run, some racing toward the eastern wall while others herded the elderly and young toward the inner keep. The celebration of Sarah's triumph transformed into desperate preparation for battle in mere seconds. "How many?" Kyle demanded, already moving toward the wall. "At least 200 hunters," the guard panted, "and 50 chimeras, maybe more. They're using siege equipment, battering rams, catapults. Your Majesty, they came prepared for war." Sarah ran alongside Kale, the crown of thorns still on her head, her body still humming with residual power from the trials. "This isn't random." They knew exactly when to attack, when I'd be exhausted from the trials, when the pack would be gathered in one place. Kale's expression was grim. "Vera. She's been coordinating with them from the beginning," Sarah confirmed. "I saw her using communication magic just now." "Kale, she planned all of this." They reached the eastern wall to find it already under assault. The massive wooden gates shuddered under the impact of a battering ram, and flaming projectiles arced over the walls, setting buildings ablaze. But worse than the hunters were the chimeras, twisted abominations that were part wolf, part human, part something else entirely. Their bodies writhed with dark magic, and their eyes glowed with unnatural red light. "Abominations," Marcus spat, drawing his sword. "They're using our own kind against us." "Those were wolves once," Sarah breathed, horror washing over her. "The hunters captured them and corrupted them with dark magic." A section of the wall exploded inward, stone and wood flying in all directions. Chimeras poured through the breach, their movements jerky and wrong, but terrifyingly fast. Thornhaven's defenders met them with fang and claw, but the corrupted creatures felt no pain, no fear. "We can't hold them," one of Kale's commanders shouted over the din. "There are too many." Sarah watched a chimera tear through 3 wolves before Marcus managed to bring it down. Even dead, its body continued to twitch, dark magic sparking across its corrupted flesh. "I can help," Sarah said, stepping forward. Kale caught her arm. "You're exhausted. The trials drained you. And these things are made of dark magic. The same magic I just learned to purify." Sarah met his eyes. "I can save them, Kale. I can turn the chimeras back into wolves." Before Kale could respond, a familiar voice called out from beyond the breach. "Hello, sister." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Through the smoke and chaos, a figure emerged. Silver blonde hair, elegant even in leather armor, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Callista, surprised to see me?" Callista laughed, gesturing to the hunters flanking her. "You didn't think you'd get to play queen without consequences, did you?" Everything that should have been mine, father's attention, respect, status, and then you steal an Alpha King? Callista, you don't understand, Sarah called out. These hunters are using you. They'll kill you the moment you're no longer useful. On the contrary, they've promised me everything I deserve, including watching you die. Callista raised her hand, and a dozen chimeras surged forward. Your move, dear sister. The chimeras charged. Sarah didn't hesitate. She thrust her hands forward, and the crown of thorns amplified her power, sending waves of purifying light cascading over the corrupted creatures. Where the radiance touched them, the dark magic burned away like mist in sunlight. The chimeras screamed, not in pain, but in release. Their twisted forms convulsed, and then they were collapsing, shifting back into their true shapes. Regular wolves, confused and terrified, but alive and whole. What? Shock flashed across Callista's face. That's not possible. They said you couldn't. They lied to you, Sarah said sadly. Just like they've lied to everyone else. A commotion behind Callista drew everyone's attention. More figures were emerging from the forest, but these weren't hunters. They were wolves, dozens of them, with eyes that glowed in various colors: silver, violet, green, amber, gold. And at their head was a young woman with tangled red hair and fierce green eyes. First pack! Someone in Thornhaven shouted. It's the first pack bloodlines. The red-haired woman raised her voice. We heard the daughter of the first moon had risen. We came to stand with her. Her gaze found Saraz. My name is Lyra. My mother died in the purge, but she told me stories. She said one day, someone would come who could unite what was scattered. I didn't believe her. I thought it was just hope. Her voice broke. But you're real. You're actually real. Lyra, Sarah breathed, feeling something slot into place in her chest. You're not alone anymore. None of you are. The first pack wolves surged forward, their various abilities creating chaos among the hunters' ranks. One wolf's roar caused the earth to shake, throwing hunters off their feet. Another raised her hands and storm clouds gathered overhead, rain beginning to fall in sheets that doused the fires. A third simply touched the ground, and vines erupted to entangle hunter weapons. But Callista had recovered from her shock. Kill them! She shrieked to the hunters. Kill them all! The battle intensified. Sarah found herself at the center of it, using her power to purify chimeras as fast as the hunters could send them. But even with the first pack wolves' help, they were outnumbered. Hunters kept pouring through the breach, and exhaustion was beginning to drag at Sarah's limbs. Then she felt it, a spike of fear through the mate bond. Sarah spun to see hunters surrounding Kale, silver nets ready to ensnare him. He fought magnificently, taking down 3 before the net caught him, its silver threads burning his skin. He roared in pain and fury, trying to tear free, but more hunters were closing in with silver-tipped spears. Kale! Sarah tried to run to him, but Callista stepped into her path, a silver dagger glinting in her hand. I've dreamed of this moment, Callista hissed. Everything you took from me, I'm taking back. She lunged. The dagger slashed toward Sarah's throat and stopped inches away, caught in Lyra's grip. The red-haired wolf had moved faster than thought, her green eyes blazing. Touch her again, Lyra breathed, and you'll discover what happens when you threaten a first-pack queen. Callista stumbled backward, fear finally breaking through her rage. You're all monsters, she whispered. No, Sarah said, moving past Lyra toward where Kale was trapped. We're just different, and that's not the same thing. She reached Kale as the hunters raised their spears for the killing blow. Sarah didn't think. She simply released everything, all the power she'd been carefully controlling, all the strength the crown amplified, all the rage and fear and desperate love that filled her. The resulting explosion of light sent every hunter flying backward like leaves in a hurricane. The silver net dissolved, and Kale collapsed, free but wounded. Sarah dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over the silver burns on his skin. "I'm here. I've got you." "Sarah," he gasped. "You can't. You're too drained." "I don't care." She poured healing energy into him, watching the burns fade. "You saved me. Now I'm saving you." Through her connection to the crown, Sarah could feel every wolf in Thornhaven. The defenders were exhausted, the first pack volunteers were overwhelmed, and more hunters were coming. They couldn't win this battle through force. But maybe they didn't have to. Sarah stood, helping Kale to his feet, and raised her voice to carry across the battlefield. "Hunters, you've been told that first pack wolves are monsters, abominations that need to be destroyed. But look around you. These chimeras you created, I've been turning them back into regular wolves, healing them, because that's what first pack power does. It heals, it creates, it protects." "Don't listen to her lies," Callista shrieked. But Sarah continued. "You've been lied to. Someone has been using your fear to commit genocide, but I'm offering you a choice. Continue this senseless killing, or lay down your weapons and see the truth for yourselves." For a moment, nothing happened. Then one hunter lowered his crossbow, then another, then a dozen more. "No!" Callista screamed. "You swore oaths. You promised." "We promised to eliminate threats," one of the hunters said, his voice shaking. "Not to murder innocents. If they can heal the chimeras, if they can undo what we've done, then they're not the monsters," another hunter finished. "We are." Weapons began clattering to the ground. Not all the hunters. Some still held their weapons, too indoctrinated to see reason, but enough that the tide of battle shifted decisively. Callista stood alone, abandoned by her allies, her face twisted with impotent rage. "This isn't over," she spat. "You haven't won." "I'm not trying to win," Sarah said gently. "I'm trying to save lives. Including yours, Callista. Please, come back with us. Let me help you understand." "I don't need your help," Callista screamed. "I don't need anything from you." She ran, straight toward the forest, toward the remaining hostile hunters, toward a future of bitterness and exile. Sarah watched her go, heartbreaking for the sister she'd never really had. Kale's hand found hers. "You can't save everyone." "I know," Sarah whispered, "but I had to try." Movement at the breach caught her attention. Vera was attempting to slip away in the chaos, her counselor's robes dirty and torn. "Guards!" Kale's voice rang out. "Arrest Counselor Vera. She is hereby charged with treason, conspiracy with enemies of the crown, and attempted murder of the Queen." Vera's face went pale as Marcus and two other guards surrounded her. "You have no proof." "This is just her word against mine. We have dozens of witnesses who saw you using communication magic during the trials," Kale said coldly. "And the timing of this attack, coinciding exactly with when Sarah would be most vulnerable, is all the proof I need. You will stand trial, Vera, and if found guilty, you will face the full penalty for treason." As Vera was dragged away, still protesting her innocence, Lyra approached with the other first pack wolves. "What happens now?" the red-haired woman asked quietly. "We've been hiding so long, we don't know how to do anything else." Sarah looked around at the wolves, modern pack and first pack alike, standing together in the aftermath of battle. At the hunters who'd laid down their weapons. At the chimeras she'd healed, now confused but free. At Thornhaven, damaged but standing. "Now," she said, the crown of thorns gleaming on her head, "we rebuild. Together." 6 weeks had passed since the siege, and Thornhaven buzzed with a different kind of energy. Not war, but transformation. Sarah stood at the window of what had become her and Kale's shared chambers, watching the courtyard below where first pack wolves worked alongside modern pack wolves to repair the damaged eastern wall. Lyra was demonstrating her ability to encourage rapid plant growth, making vines that could reinforce the stonework. A young first-pack male whose gift was earth manipulation was reshaping crumbled stone back into solid blocks. "You're thinking too much again." Kale's voice came from behind her, warm with affection. Sarah leaned back against his chest as his arms came around her waist. "I'm thinking about Vera's trial tomorrow, about what her testimony might reveal." Over the past weeks, Vera had finally broken under questioning, revealing the full extent of the conspiracy. She'd been recruited by the hooded hunter years ago, promised power and status in exchange for eliminating first-pack survivors. She'd helped track down Sarah's mother, she'd coordinated dozens of attacks. And she wasn't the only counselor involved. 2 others had fled Thornhaven when the plot unraveled. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," Kale murmured against her hair. "You're not alone in this." Sarah turned in his arms, studying his face. Over the weeks, something had shifted between them. The mate bond had deepened, but they'd been so busy with rebuilding, with integrating the first pack wolves, with managing the political fallout, that they'd barely had time to explore what that bond truly meant. "There's something I need to tell you," Sarah said quietly, "about what happened during my final transformation attempt. The one that saved you." Kale's brow furrowed. "What about it?" "I felt it, Kale. The moment I accepted my power fully, stopped fighting what I am, I felt the bond complete from your side, but mine." She touched his chest, right over his heart. "For the bond to be truly complete, for me to be your equal in every way, I need to claim you as you claimed me." Understanding dawned in Kale's eyes. The role reversal. "You need to be the one who—" He stopped, heat flooding his gaze. "When?" "Now," Sarah said. "If you'll have me. Not as your protected mate, not as the wolf you saved, but as your equal. Your queen." Kale's response was to pull her closer, his lips finding hers in a kiss that sent fire racing through her veins. The mate bond flared between them, and Sarah felt his consent, his desire, his absolute certainty that she was his match in every way. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale's voice was rough. "Then claim me, Sarah. Make me yours as I made you mine." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reached up to cup his face. Through the bond, she could feel his pulse racing, matching hers. She leaned in, her lips brushing the spot where his neck met his shoulder. The same place he'd want to mark on her, if their first claiming hadn't been interrupted by her trials. "You're mine," she whispered against his skin. "My mate, my king, my equal." And then she bit down. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Power surged through the bond, not her magic flowing into him, but something else entirely. Their souls recognizing each other, intertwining, becoming something greater than either could be alone. Kale gasped, his hands tightening on her waist. Through the bond, Sarah felt his emotions crash over her in waves: love, pride, desire, and something deeper. The absolute certainty that they were meant for this, meant for each other, meant to stand together against whatever came. When Sarah pulled back, she saw her own wonder reflected in Kale's eyes, which had shifted to that luminous gold. "I feel you," he breathed, "not just your emotions, but your thoughts, your power, everything." "And I feel you," Sarah confirmed. The bond between them was now visible even without stress or danger, a constant thread of light connecting their hearts. "We're truly one now." Kale's hand came up to touch the mark she'd left on his neck, a mirror to the faded mark he'd given her in his delirium all those weeks ago. "My fierce queen," he murmured, "I am honored to be yours." What followed was tender and desperate and perfect, two souls finally, completely united. And when they lay tangled together afterward, the bond singing with contentment, Sarah felt truly at peace for the first time since her mother's death. The next morning, Vera's trial was held in the main arena, the same place where Sarah had proven herself weeks before. But now, instead of hostility, Sarah felt the assembled wolves' acceptance. Not all of them loved her yet, but they respected her, and that was enough. Vera stood in chains before the judgment seat where Cale presided, with Sarah at his right hand. The former counselor looked diminished, her face haggard. "Counselor Vera," Cale's voice rang out, "you stand accused of treason, conspiracy with enemies of the crown, and attempted murder. How do you plead?" "Guilty," Vera said dully. "But I want it known. I did what I thought was right. First Pack wolves destroyed the natural order once before. I was trying to prevent that from happening again." "By murdering innocents?" Sarah asked. "By helping slaughter entire families?" "They weren't innocents," Vera insisted. They were children," Sarah interrupted. "Healers, teachers, artists, people who wanted nothing more than to live in peace. You didn't eliminate threats, Vera. You eliminated hope." Vera finally looked at her, and Sarah saw something break in the older woman's expression. "I was wrong," she whispered. "Watching you heal those chimeras, seeing the first Pack wolves fight to defend us instead of destroying us, I was wrong. But it's too late for me to fix what I've done." "The penalty for treason is death," Cale said. "But Sarah has requested an alternative sentence, and as queen, that is her right. What say you, my queen?" Sarah stood, feeling the weight of the crown of thorns on her head. Vera will spend the rest of her life in service. She will travel to every pack in the territories, telling her story, warning others about how fear and prejudice can twist good intentions into genocide. She will bear witness to what she's done, and perhaps through that witnessing, prevent others from making the same mistakes. "A lifetime of shame instead of a quick death," someone in the crowd muttered. "Some would say that's crueler." "Some would say it's justice," Sarah replied. "Not vengeance, justice, and a chance for Vera to perhaps, eventually find redemption." Vera wept as the sentence was pronounced. Guards led her away, but as she passed Sarah, she stopped. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't deserve this mercy." "No one deserves mercy," Sarah said gently. "That's what makes it mercy." That evening, Thornhaven held a celebration, not of victory, but of unity. The courtyard was filled with wolves from dozens of packs, modern and first pack alike, sharing food and stories. Lyra found Sarah near the food tables. "The other first pack survivors want to know, what happens to us now? Do we stay here? Return to hiding?" "You stay," Sarah said firmly, "or you go, if that's what you want. But you'll never have to hide again. We're creating a new council, one that includes representatives from every bloodline, first pack and modern alike. Your voices will be heard. Your gifts will be celebrated, not feared." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "My mother died dreaming of a day like this. I wish she could see it." "She can," Sarah said, squeezing the other woman's hand. "Through you. Through all of us who survived." Later, as the party continued, Cale pulled Sarah aside to a quiet corner of the wall where they could look out over the valley. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, simple silver, but carved with intricate wolf patterns that seemed to move in the moonlight. "It was my grandmother's," Cale explained. "She was one of the few council members who spoke against my father's purge. She died before she could see it stopped. But she made me promise that when I found my mate, I would give her this ring as a symbol that we choose love over fear, unity over division." Sarah's throat tightened as Kale slipped the ring onto her finger. "I love you," she whispered. "I don't think I've said it enough, but I do. Completely." "I know," Kyle said with a smile. "I can feel it. Through here." He touched his chest where her claiming mark rested. "Every moment of every day I feel your love, and you feel mine." "Always," Sarah agreed. They stood together, watching the celebration below. Sarah wondered if somewhere in that crowd her father stood watching. Beta Thorne, who'd remarried so quickly after her mother's death, who'd allowed Callista and her mother to treat Sarah so cruelly. Did he feel regret? Pride? Shame? She might never know, but the thought no longer hurt as it once had. She'd found her true family here, in this place, with these people. Movement in the courtyard caught her eye. Callista, standing at the very edge of the celebration, half hidden in shadows. Their eyes met across the distance, and Sarah saw confusion in her stepsister's expression. Not hate anymore, but bewilderment. Sarah raised her hand in a small wave, an invitation. Callista stood frozen for a long moment. Then, slowly, she shook her head and disappeared back into the darkness. "She'll come around," Kale said quietly. "Or she won't. But you offered her the choice. That's all you can do." "I know," Sarah said. "I just hope she finds peace eventually." "And us?" Kyle asked, pulling her close. "Have we found peace?" Sarah thought about the work still ahead. Integrating the first pack wolves fully into society, hunting down the remaining rogue hunters, rebuilding the trust that had been broken by genocide. It would take years, maybe generations. But as she looked up at Kale, feeling the mate bond strong and complete between them, sensing Lyra's joy and the other first pack wolves' hope through her connection to the crown, hearing the laughter of wolves who'd been enemies weeks ago now sharing food and stories. "Not peace," she said with a smile. "Something better. Purpose, and each other." Kale's answering smile was radiant. "Then let's build something beautiful." Far below, the celebration continued. Modern pack wolves and first pack wolves, former hunters and former victims, all dancing together under the full moon. And standing above them all, wearing the crown of thorns and the mate mark of her alpha king, Sarah felt the truth settle into her bones. She was home. Finally, completely, home. Not in a place, but in a purpose. Not in hiding, but in the open, standing tall. She was Sarah Thorne, daughter of the first moon, queen of Thornhaven, bridge between two worlds. And she was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later. The new council chamber gleamed with morning light, its circular design ensuring no seat was higher than another. Sarah sat between Kale and Lyra, watching as representatives from 15 different packs, modern and first pack alike, debated the latest proposal. "If we establish healing centers in every territory," Lyra was saying, "staffed by both first pack healers and modern pack medics, we can demonstrate the value of cooperation." "And the cost?" asked a traditional pack alpha. "Would be shared equally among all packs," Sarah answered. "This isn't about charity. It's about building something better for all our children." The alpha considered, then nodded. "The Northern Valley pack agrees." One by one, the others added their support. Not unanimous, it never was, but enough to pass the measure. After the session, Sarah walked through Thornhaven's gardens with Kale, her hand resting on the slight swell of her belly. The healers had confirmed it last week. She was carrying the next generation, a child who would be born of both Alpha King and First Pack Queen bloodlines. "Nervous?" Kyle asked, his hand covering hers. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "What if they inherit my power? What if the world isn't ready for—" "Then we'll make it ready," Kale said firmly. "Together." just like we've done everything else?" Sarah smiled, leaning into his warmth. In the distance, she could see first pack children playing with modern pack children, their different abilities creating games that neither could play alone. She could hear Lyra laughing as she taught a group of young wolves about herbal medicine. She could feel, through her connection to the crown, the contentment of hundreds of wolves who'd found a home in Thornhaven. It wasn't perfect. There were still packs that refused to accept first pack wolves, still hunters who believed the old propaganda, still wounds that would take generations to fully heal. But they were trying, and that, Sarah had learned, was enough. Not perfection, but progress. Not immediate peace, but steady hope. "Ready to change the world, my queen?" Kale asked with a smile. Sarah touched the crown of thorns on her head, felt the mate mark on her neck, placed her other hand over their growing child. "I already have," she said. "Now I'm ready to help it grow." And hand in hand, the Alpha King and his first pack queen walked into their future, whatever it might bring. Thank you for following Sarah and Kale's journey from humiliation to triumph, from isolation to belonging, from fear to hope. May we all find the courage to embrace what makes us different, and the wisdom to see that our greatest strength lies in unity, not uniformity.